All right, everyone. Let's start. It's 2 o'clock, so we will start with this session. And thanks for joining. It's good to see that there are so many people. And today I will tell something about implementing the XDR, in this case an open XDR. And what I'm not going to do is telling what we offer as Barracuda. I'm not going to tell that we are the greatest. But what I'm trying to do is give a little bit of education how an open XDR works, and also why it's important or maybe not important for your organization, because there are many more things to take in consideration than only the XDR part. So that will be the story of today, and hope you have something on it. So the thing is, we are on a cybersecurity conference today, and this is what everyone is telling you. The number one concern for every company is a compromise, risks to take your company down. Yeah. Who knows this guy? No one? You know, I know. So this is Xander Koppelmans. Somebody recognize? I see some knocking there in the back. Awesome, awesome. So this is just maybe like you and me, an entrepreneur, just some guy who has a company. And sorry that it is in Dutch, but I will translate it for those who cannot read it. But the short story of Xander Koppelmans is that his company were compromised, and he thought his IT company, where he bought the services from, had everything sorted. And that's what we all think. It turned out that that was not the case. And short summary is, eventually, after 2 years, his accountant told him, "Hey, Xander, maybe it's a better idea to stop your company." He had 50 employees. And they were all on the streets. But more importantly, he had the same bank for his business as for his private things. And you understand that if your company is going down, that it will also give you a lot of stress. So after those 2 years, he starts smoking again. And as you can see, he looks old. But he's not very old. So the thing is, it can happen to everyone. But the impact is much more wider than you maybe realize if your company is being hijacked or compromised. After those 2 years, he shut down his company. But because he was on the same bank with his business as private, it turned out that he also needed to sell his house. His wife left him, and his relation with his daughter was broken. That was the impact. And still, up to date, this is really the story which lighted a fire in me to work every day for the companies where we work with to help them with their cybersecurity. So, as this is a story, there are many stories. But what is the risk? Who knows this film? Come on, guys. Cannot be the case that no one knows this. This is the movie In the Line of Fire. Rings a bell now? Awesome. Why I bring this story up? Because everyone knows that he came through the gates in that film because he had a pistol in different parts. So he came to the gates, and after the gates, he was able to assemble a full pistol to shoot the president down. But that was not happening in the movie, but you get the point. So why does it matter? Why does it matter that Because effectively, we are saying that if you're monitoring, so if you have the gates, you're monitoring if somebody takes maybe a knife or whatever, metal part or whatever, with them. But this means that monitoring only through gates is not enough. Another example which I would like to tell you is this other movie. As an example, to elaborate why monitoring in your environment from IT perspective is really important. Who knows this movie? All right. So we know with Home Alone that these guys were trying to break in. I don't have to tell you that. But we also know that they were out on cash, on jewelry, on electronics, and so on and so on. Same as hackers. You know, they are on the hunt of your data, or maybe to knock your company down, or maybe whatever, like all kinds of things. And see this as your IT environment. And the best example is always a house, in my opinion. Because at a house, you have a front door, maybe your firewall. But you also have your windows. Windows is a problem, but that's a different story. And also, garage ports can also be used to break in or come into your house. Back door, other windows upstairs, and so on and so on. So you see, there are many, many gates or windows or doors to come into your house, so your environment. Which also means if you have an application, firewall, applications, whatever, they are all open. And you would like to monitor them. That is where XDR is about. But Kevin, he had a plan to get those guys out or keep them out. And imagine that if you're going to your IT manager or whoever is responsible for your environment, maybe even here in this audience, there are people responsible for that, and they come up with this plan. That would be fun. That would be really, really fun. The thing is, Kevin tried to keep the guys out with a fire, ice on the stairs, a fryer on his head. We all know that scene. So, in regards of XDR and SOC and so on, which I will explain in a bit, we also need to have a plan. Because imagine that all these elements, like a fire, ice, maybe the cans of the paint, those you can see your IT environment as the same. So where your firewall or your network or maybe your applications or your users, the identity, and so on, those are similar to these elements. And you have to protect them all. But you cannot only do that per an identity or per an application or per a network. And this is where XDR is mainly going around. Then, if we translate this to where we work with every day, we have a lot of important things. And we as IT administrators or company owners think that everything is important. And I can tell you, if you need to pay for it, not a lot is important. But we think, as Barracuda, but also other companies, that you can also focus on a few things to monitor the most important elements around your crown jewels. And from a technical perspective, that means that your endpoint, your network, your cloud, and email are important elements. And there are a few more, which I will not explain now, but it's just to elaborate a little bit on the conversation around XDR and why it's important. So imagine My clicker was not working, sorry. Imagine that these elements, so a network, can also hit your endpoint, can also hit your email, and so on and so on. But then more importantly here is that you can also see people around these topics. So if you have a company which is a medium size or maybe a small size, you maybe have one person for multiple of these elements, or you have a person per an element. And this is already an important factor, because if you would like to monitor your environment, the knowledge cannot only be one person or a few persons. And if they have the knowledge on a certain topic, you also will want to bring them together. And in regards of monitoring, that is exactly the same. So if something happens in your network, let's say a ransomware attack or whatever, it can also infect your endpoint. It can also infect your cloud, your email, and so on and so on. So that means that you need to bring everything together. And this is just a general overview of how that works, because in the end, if you have all your data, like the customer data, into one platform, which is the XDR platform, you can basically aggregate all the information, all the syslog, and you can alert based on that. That's a very, very short summary of what it actually is. But when you're doing that, you want, no worries. So there was someone taking a picture, so I get back. So when you're doing that, you have a holistic view on all your technical elements from an XDR perspective. So what offers this? And actually the credits are going to Dan here, who's also in the audience, because this is his slide. Because imagine, so who knows this film, by the way? Yeah, there you go. There you go. So you know that if he's somewhere here, that he has a light with it, and he's only shining on a part of the museum. But he doesn't have the visibility on the whole museum. And that is exactly what is happening if you're only focusing on your network or only focusing on your endpoint. You need to bring it together. It's really, really important. So, as I said, I would like to have a little bit of an education in this session. It's also important to understand what types of XDRs and SOCs there are. So I made this slide to elaborate a little bit on, okay, an open XDR, very interesting. But what does that really mean for my organization? What do I really get? And who is already having a SOC in this audience? Yeah, we all have SOCs on, I know, but and who is currently looking for SOCs or an XDR solution? It's not a lot, guys. Is there also not a topic going around XDR in your company? Who's? No? Sorry again? Yeah, both. Both. Could be either XDR, SOC, just around those topics. But there's not a lot going on in this audience around that topic, apparently. Okay. Anyway, so if that topic is coming up, it's really important to understand where does the open XDR or other XDR solutions positions themselves for your organization. And there are in my world, by the way, so my world, there are 4 types. And that is, the first one is native XDR, which means that if you have a particular vendor and they only integrate with their vendor-related products, which means that who's familiar with an EDR, by the way? EDR, yeah, a little bit more. An MDR, okay, yeah, there you go, a little bit more again. So that means that for an EDR, you have an endpoint detection system. Yeah? It only alerts based on your endpoints. If you have it in a managed detection form, it means that they can also partly automatically remediate, or they have a team behind your environment to also manage a few of these detections in regards of your endpoints. So where does XDR come into play? This is basically a collection of your endpoint, your cloud, your email, network, and so on. So that's what I already said, but this is basically the differences between those topics. And then, if you have an XDR, for example, on email, cloud, and so on, you can also do that with one vendor sometimes. And that is a native XDR. But we all know that we do not like maybe the firewall of one vendor, or maybe the other firewall is cheaper, better, whatever. So we're using different vendors. Everyone is using Microsoft 365, I guess, which is also not included in the native XDR. So therefore, we need to have an open XDR. And an open XDR has a particular focus on maybe a few integrations, let's say between 50 and 100. But those are fully managed, which means that they are being managed from A to Z. I will explain a little bit more in detail in a bit. The third one is a hybrid form. And a hybrid form is, for example, an XDR as some other vendors having here, but it means that you can integrate everything. Who's familiar with Elasticsearch, for example? Yeah, it is similar as that. So you can integrate all your solutions, all your syslogs, but it also means that you have to maintain those internal intelligence more with your own personal than what you have with a managed solution. And then the last one is a SIEM. I hope a lot of people know SIEM, but think about Microsoft Sentinel, for example. So I have given a few benefits of what are the pluses and the minuses. And in regards of the native XDR, you understand that you have a less flexibility because you're sticking to one vendor. Also, terms like SOAR, ATR, and TIP, which I will not explain, but it means that there is a lot of intelligence within the XDR solution, are a lot less with a native XDR than with others. Who is familiar with playbooks in XDR? And I already can guess that there's not a lot because you were not raising your hands when I talked about XDR. So sorry. But it means effectively, so a playbook. So imagine that if you're sending your syslogs from your firewall to a XDR solution, that only generates a certain alerts. But those alerts need to be clarified as well, because you would like to easily read those. So in this regard, you would like to have a playbook from that vendor or the solution you're buying to have basically a simple readable alert with, hey, I see a brute force, it's coming from this IP, it happened then and then and then, and that's basically it. And the more playbooks we have, the more knowledge we can also combine with other solutions, which means that if you're having a brute force and suddenly you also have an account takeover, that needs to be collected as one event in an XDR solution, and that is also aligning with that playbook. Simply readable, and hey, this is what happened, that's it. But then what does the runbooks mean? It means that if you have the identification of a playbook in terms of, hey, there happened a brute force attack and an account takeover, you also would like to have an advice. Oh, we have seen an account takeover, we have seen a brute force, but to prevent this in the future, I advise you to do X, I, Z, and so on and so on. And this is basically what a runbook means, that you also immediately get an advice, hey, that's brute force, you can prevent the next time by doing this and this and that. That's basically what the runbooks means. So, as you can see, in a native XDR, those things are definitely minuses and minuses and minuses, because they are only focusing on one vendor. Another thing which is a minus is people, because you also have to invest in people for those alerts who are not being properly identified by a SOC maybe. So you have to invest a little bit of people as well. Then, in regards of an open XDR, you have a little bit more flexibility, because you can now also integrate maybe with your Microsoft 365, with other vendors regarding your firewalls or endpoint detection solutions, so you have more flexibility. But as you can see, there's definitely more pluses on the SOAR and the ATR elements. Why is that? Because we are collecting more integrations, we also have more knowledge. And the interesting thing here is, because we are only focusing on a set of integrations and not everything, we can heavily focus on those integrations we really support. That is basically why an open XDR is really interesting, because there's really focus on the important integrations. Similar for the playbooks and the runbooks. And also in regards of people, if you have an open XDR where you combine more integrations, you also have to invest less people, because in the native XDR, out of scope is other vendors, other solutions. So you have to invest monitoring and technical knowledge on the other products and monitoring elements. So, and then you also have a hybrid form where you have the option to integrate with everything. And as said, that means also that you have to create maybe for the custom integrations your own playbooks, your own runbooks, your own SOAR capabilities. Which means that that's why it's 1+. You have the option, but you have to invest more people to maintenance that solution. And this is really important in terms of your internal processes, and not only depending on a solution you're buying here. And the last one, and this is also the last slide of my presentation, by the way, so you're almost free, is the SIEM solution. And again, Sentinel from Microsoft is, for example, a SIEM solution. And they have also, from a community-driven playbooks, runbooks, and SOAR capabilities. But the thing is that this solution requires, and it's a minus, but actually it means more people, because you have to invest in a lot of technical people to maintenance this solution. And yes, you can also buy it with other vendors, like maybe a Fox IT, who can manage your SIEM solution. The interesting thing is that it is always facing down to your own environment. And with an open XDR, you're running in a collaborative environment where you also gain knowledge from other customers and solutions as well. So these are a few practical things in regards of what is an open XDR, but also in relation of the wider market. I think a very, very interesting summarization, I hope. And thanks for listening.